Britain's armed police are amongst the toughest in the world.
Put it down!
These men and women face untold dangers. And every day could be the day they pull the trigger. They rarely talk about the realities of the job or the pressures of taking a life. But now, we've brought them together for the first time to speak openly.
I carried on shooting until I couldn't see him anymore.
In this series, they break their covenant of silence.
You acknowledge fear, you embrace fear.
And reveal what it's really like to be an armed police officer.
We don't get up in the morning thinking I'm going to go and shoot somebody. We get up in the morning wanting to come home and bath the kids.
That's it! There we are!
These officers come face to face with marauding attackers.
It's the most dangerous thing that you're confronted with as an armed police officer.
Lie in wait for organised criminal gangs.
Crime is changing, it's evolving.
And save the lives of innocent hostages.
Sometimes you can't avoid using deadly force.
That shot may have to be fired, and indeed that shot may be lethal. Our job is to protect the public.
866.
In rooms like this, up and down the UK, there lays an arsenal of weapons.
There are a small number of people within this country who want to inflict misery and violence on our communities. Our officers every single day, whether armed or unarmed, have to bring these offenders to justice.
This is a job like no other, where men and women put themselves in mortal danger to keep the public safe.
If you're not scared of something, there's probably a problem.
I've woken up in hospital a couple of times. I've been almost killed on several occasions.
My dad and I were never particularly close, but he was one of these, be careful, son, you know. I wanted to be careful, Dad. I'd have been a postman, wouldn't I, you know.
Get away!
Tonight, officers reveal the art of the manhunt, tracking and containing a deadly threat.
Felt as if we were closing that net.
The tactics they use to circle their target.
It was the first operation in UK history to use explosive entry.
And how they face a new terror that must be neutralised at any cost.
A manhunt certainly isn't the norm. If anybody is posing a threat to the community, it's got to be dealt with.
I'm absolutely not going to stop. You're going to have to kill me, but I'm never going to stop.
The toughest armed missions start with a game of high-stakes cat and mouse. And in this country, the pioneer of the modern manhunt is Tony.
The longer that we give them to think about their options, the greater the risks to the public and to the environment and to ourselves. Our conventional methods for arresting subjects on the loose is going from premises to premises, searching, pinpointing them down to particular locations, all intelligence-based.
There have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. Our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world.
Four suicide bombers have struck, killing 52 and injuring hundreds more. 2 weeks later, the city is still in shock. When 5 more young men arrive in London, intent on bloody destruction. One Ramzi Mohammed, boards a tube at Oval Station. Intent on killing everyone around him, he detonates a suicide bomb. But it fails.
London is attacked once again. 3 tube trains and a bus targeted.
Eyewitnesses to the attacks reported that these small explosions took place in rucksacks.
Across London, the other bombs also fail to detonate, and the gang members quickly flee the scenes. Now, 5 wannabe bombers are on the run and possibly planning their next attack.
We all felt that London was unsafe. We wanted to make London safe again.
I think that 7/7 was a watershed for firearms policing. Tactically, we just hadn't seen the sort of modus operandi of the terrorists, which was to go onto our tubes and blow themselves up.
Well, obviously that was the wake-up call, wasn't it? We looked at ways that we could enhance our response to the new threat.
This was the biggest manhunt that UK policing had undertaken since the Second World War. And it became very apparent that the whole of the MPS was being activated to try and capture these individuals. We wanted to get out there and we wanted to try and, make a difference.
Intelligence leads armed police to a block of flats in the borough of Kensington in West London, where detectives believe 2 of the wanted bombers could be hiding inside.
Move back, please.
It was on the top floor. We evacuated the 2 flats either side. We contain it as quietly as possible without trying to arouse too much suspicion.
More than 20 armed officers take up positions surrounding the flat. Tony can be seen here in the green, coordinating the operation.
Once we'd secured the balcony, the door became my priority. I wanted to make sure that we gained vision into the flat. And the door being closed restricted our vision into the flat.
Tony must find a way to get inside the property.
Oh my God.
The explosion is Tony and his heavily armed team, blowing the flat door from its hinges.
It was the first operation in UK history to use explosive entry. We were then able to see inside, we were able to stop their movement from room to room. We were closing their space down. He had a sniper on that roof over there, and you could see into the doorway right the way through. We were pretty convinced that they were at the rear of the building. My goal was to get them out as quickly but as safely as possible for everyone. My major concern at this point of time was that if they came out onto the balcony and activated an IED, then the balcony team who was securing that location would have been killed. They knew we were out there and they were not responding to our calls to come out to surrender.
They genuinely believed that he was imminently about to detonate a bomb.
Britain's armed police are always updating the methods they use to hunt down their targets, especially when that target can blow up at any time.
We've had to adapt our tactics.
Snipers had to up their game. We were now looking at the potential of having to shoot somebody in the head at distance to prevent them detonating an explosive device.
How do you deal with a suicide killer on London streets if he is carrying some form of device. It's a very difficult one to solve.
It's 2005, and the Met are conducting the biggest manhunt in history. By circling the area and gradually closing the net, armed police have surrounded 2 of the 5 wannabe terrorists who have tried to attack the tube network with homemade bombs.
The net was closing on them. It was just actually pinpointing them down to particular premises.
But it isn't just London that's on high alert. And when news lands that one of the bombers has fled the capital, attention turns to the West Midlands. Leading the manhunt there is Stuart Johnson, who adopts the same strategy of pinpointing and then surrounding the suspect.
The clock is ticking. If he's armed, he will shoot. If he's carrying explosives, that he may detonate those explosives. My team were prepared to deal with that scenario.
CCTV captures the fugitive, disguised in a burqa, arriving at the city bus station. And intelligence tracks him to a property in the suburbs.
It's early hours, very quiet, not a lot of people around. Seconds seem like minutes from the command being given to move forward to the next transmission on the radio. It's a difficult time in many respects. It seems to last forever. There is the usual pause, the silence. And then you start to hear the team progress through the property. At times I almost felt as I was holding my breath, waiting for that first transmission from the team as to what they'd found inside.
Living room is secured. Moving to stairway.
The team have gone into the bathroom, pushed the door open, and they'd encountered arguably the most dangerous and threatening scenario that they would ever experience in their entire lives. They'd found a man standing in the bath with a rucksack on his back and holding a mobile phone.
I had grave concerns about the rucksack on his back. I brought the point of my aim to the back of his head, during which time his hands disappeared towards his chest. At this point, I formed the opinion that I was going to have to shoot this man.
After a violent melee, armed cops use a non-lethal taser to disarm the man and secure his arrest. Despite all the risks, no officers were injured.
There was a very real possibility that the subject could have been shot. But in that scenario, it's a split-second decision. It worked. It takes immense bravery and judgment to be able to deal with that situation as they did.
It's a constant argument that you're having in your head. There's an element to it where everything you've done in your training leads up to that moment. Do I pull the trigger or do I not?
Oh, please! Hands in the air! Hands in the air! Hands in the air! Open your door! Open your door!
Is the action I'm about to take reasonable, proportionate and absolutely necessary under the circumstances?
Open the door! Open the door! You want out! Get out of the car!
I would certainly say that at times not pulling a trigger is very, very, very difficult.
In London, armed officer Tony is leading a manhunt in flats in North Kensington. He's already used explosives to remove the door. Now he's waiting and hoping for the men to emerge.
They were now surrounded by armed police, and they effectively knew that. I only saw that they had maybe one or two options. The preferred option for me was for them to come out and surrender to police.
12 months earlier, terrorists in Spain had lured police into their hideout before detonating a suicide bomb. One officer was killed and 6 more injured. Now, that incident is playing on Tony's mind.
These types of terrorists would prefer to die than become arrested by the police. They knew we were out there, and they were not responding to our calls to come out to surrender. We placed several CS rounds into the premises.
It's not exactly clear what it is, but we've now heard 4 shots coming from the direction of the flats over there.
CS will cause you to cough, cause your eyes to run. It's a really uncomfortable feeling. We wanted them to come out in their underwear. We wanted to make sure that as they were walking up the corridor, we could clearly see they weren't carrying anything or nothing was strapped to them. We were still on edge all the way through that process. They were actually in their underpants, and they were coming out.
By zoning in on the suspects, circling them and flushing them out, the manhunt is finally over, and the bombers are alive.
Delgado Gardens was one of those instances where we made a big difference. You know, we arrested 2 terrorists and they went to jail for a long time.
Across the operation, the 5 wanted men were all caught and jailed for a combined sentence of over 100 years in prison. The biggest manhunt in policing history had stopped a gang determined to take innocent lives. But when you're hunting targets in a large urban area, sometimes things can go wrong. As part of the operation, a Brazilian man called John Charles de Menezes was gunned down by armed officers in Stockwell Tube Station in a tragic case of mistaken identity.
Many people will remember the fact that John Charles de Menezes, unfortunately, lived in the same block of flats as one of the terrorist suspects.
But surveillance officers believed he was one of them and followed him to Stockwell Tube Station.
They genuinely believed that he was imminently about to detonate a bomb on a tube. I know the 2 lads that pulled the trigger, the 2 shooters. And when ordinary folk would have been running in the opposite direction, they actually ran to what they thought was their death.
The Metropolitan Police apologised for the incident, amidst allegations that they had behaved improperly. The victim's family called for someone to be prosecuted, but no charges were brought, and a coroner's court issued an open verdict. The busiest month in police history put Britain's armed police firmly in the spotlight. The art of hunting down suspects changed forever. Police now face a new enemy, one that is fearless when confronted with lethal force.
Today's world is more violent and less predictable and more political in some ways than the one that I joined in the late 1970s.
The tactical challenges facing firearms officers have really changed over the last 10 years.
Where somebody's willing to, sacrifice themselves to injure others, it's very difficult then to deal with that and contain that when somebody ultimately wants to die anyway, I think.
When hunting down a target that is motivated to keep killing, the rules of engagement change. Armed cops must do everything they can to create a buffer zone around the threat. It's called containment.
An armed gunman like Raoul Moat is an extremely dangerous person.
I'm coming to get you. I'm not on the run. I am coming to get you.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your own safety, I need you to move back.
Please give yourself up.
This was the biggest manhunt that I've ever been involved with. You were never safe at any point. It had to be stopped.
Northumbria, and there's a gunman on the loose. 37-year-old Raoul Moat, a volatile ex-con, has opened fire on a love rival, killing him instantly and injuring his ex-girlfriend. Armed officer Neil Robson is leading the manhunt for Northumbria Police.
Raoul Moat's dislike of Northumbria Police was long-running. He'd come into contact with the police on numerous occasions, normally for petty crime, but most certainly he felt as if Northumbria Police had affected his life.
Before cops can find Moat, the fugitive calls the police and makes threats to kill more.
Hello there, this is the gunman from Berkeley last night. My name is Raoul Moat. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done. So the fact of the matter is, right, that she's had an affair with one of your officers. Was he not a police officer, I wouldn't have shot him. I've lost everything through you, right? Just won't leave us alone, right? You killed me and Tim before that trigger was ever pulled. I'm coming to get you. I'm not on the run. I am coming to get you.
Moat has developed a hatred of the police in the mistaken belief that his love rival is a serving officer, and his hatred is about to explode.
The radio came to life, and all I heard on the radio was a voice saying, "I've been shot." And I remember looking at my colleague and thinking, did you hear what I've just heard? And then again, the radio came to life where Dave Rathburn gave his collar number and just said, "I've been shot." We realised we were very close to him and able to travel there very quickly to be able to offer some support. So I get out my vehicle and I go over to the police car where Dave is. And he slumped in the driver's seat with what I can only describe was some of the most horrific facial injuries that I've seen on anybody at work. That's when I thought to myself, that could very easily have been me. I could have been sitting in that police car. I could have been sitting on that roundabout. I could have been targeted by Raoul Moat. And he had to be stopped.
A lot of police are haunted, not by ghosts, but by incidents that took place in the career.
There isn't a policy to deliberately kill people. It's actually to arrest people and put them on trial and convict them and put them in prison.
Here's a man on the run looking for police officers to kill. He could have walked up and picked off anybody he wanted.
Britain's armed police have never been busier.
Secure!
In recent years, they've seen an increase in operations where armed criminals won't stop when confronted by police. But in 2010, cops in Northumbria were facing a manhunt with a lone fugitive who was bent on targeting police.
An armed gunman, lone wolf, like Raoul Moat, is an extremely dangerous person. No empathy, no concern for their safety, no concern for anybody else's. Probably one of the most dangerous individuals you're going to come across because they've got nothing to lose.
Raoul, the Berkeley gunman. I've just downed your office at the roundabout at the west end of Newcastle.
Yes.
Are you taking this serious now? Well, I'm going to destroy a few lives like you've destroyed mine.
Where are you?
I'm not going to tell you. Listen, I'm going to keep coming for you. I'm absolutely not going to stop. You're going to have to kill me. And I'm never going to stop.
That's the voice of Raoul Moat. In 2010, he was on the run after shooting dead a love rival and critically injuring his ex-girlfriend. Now he shot a policeman, and cops are hunting him down.
His whole intention was to kill and maim, and he had to be stopped.
Mr. Moat, I've said it before, and I will say it again. We want to apprehend you safely. Please give yourself up.
But Raoul Moat has no plans to go quietly. He shot one police officer, and he plans to target more. But for now, he's on the run, and nobody knows where he is.
On firearms deployments, you have opportunities whereby you relax. On the deployment for Raoul Moat, we never had that opportunity to relax because you never knew where he was. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I remember sitting in the car and I thought to myself at that point, here's a man, a gunman, on the run, looking for police officers to kill. And I remember looking around and seeing my old team were all asleep in the cars. He could have walked up and picked off anybody he wanted.
Neil and his team are closing in on Moat as his black car is found abandoned in the remote town of Rothbury.
If I was a man on the run, I would go to Rothbury. You've got huge wooded areas, you've got huge rural areas. You also have buildings that are derelict, that aren't used. Moat had more than enough places to hide in Rothbury. But this was probably one of the first times for me that we felt as if we were closing that net around Moat.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your own safety, I need you to move back in a line. Keep moving, please.
With no idea where he is, police fear Moat could strike at any time. The whole town is in lockdown and in terror.
This was the biggest manhunt stroke firearms operation that I've ever been involved with.
Neil can be seen here, leading some of the 160 armed officers he had at his disposal.
It was almost like a ring of steel. You had a cordon of armed officers which were stopping people leaving or coming into Rothbury. Inside that were other armed officers who were responding to sightings, intelligence and information that were leading us to locations. We wrapped Rothbury in that ring of steel. But the advantage Raoul Moat had was he could see us coming, but we couldn't see him. The pressure on the force, and more certainly the senior officers within the force, was how can you be certain that he's there? Have you put all your eggs in one basket? So we were determined to find him and to prove that he was there. I felt that he was in Rothbury, and it was only a matter of time before either he came to us or we came to him.
Neil's hunch was right, as Moat lets his guard slip and is spotted close to a riverbank on the edge of town. He's armed with a shotgun and threatening suicide. The manhunt might be over, but the standoff continues.
Raoul Moat had made it very clear throughout the whole week that he'd been on the run that he wasn't going back to prison, that you weren't going to take him alive. And it was always our hope that once we located Raoul Moat, that we'd be able to negotiate him and bring him to a safe arrest.
As darkness begins to fall, officers throw Moat a sandwich and water, determined to keep him alive.
Raoul Moat, I don't think, was the person who thought this through. I think he acted instinctively. He found himself in a situation whereby he had nowhere else to go. He started a course of events which led him down a road to where he ended up on that final night.
In a final act of defiance, Moat pulls the trigger on his shotgun. Police officers rush to his aid and bring in paramedics, but it's too late. Raoul Moat died shortly afterwards in hospital.
There was some relief in so much as that this was over, and no other member of the public or no other police officer had been injured. But I'm a very reflective person, and what I got a strong sense of after it was all over was the what ifs. What if this had happened differently? What if that had happened? To this day I still think about what happened that week in Rothbury and those what ifs.
Raoul Moat's family expressed their disappointment at how the operation ended, but an IPCC investigation praised officers for their well-thought-out negotiations and found no evidence of misconduct by any police officers. Containing Moat with an iron ring of armed cops meant that he was unable to kill more innocent victims. But not all operations go according to plan.
Put the knife down now! Put it down!
A lot of police officers, I believe, are haunted not by ghosts, but by incidents that took place in the career.
I think the ability to be able to go home and switch off is a skill in itself. And I must admit, there were some occasions where I probably struggled a little bit with that.
You will reflect and reflect and reflect on those, and you're never going to change that. But it doesn't stop you thinking, if only I'd got there sooner, if only I'd been able to do this, that maybe that person wouldn't have been injured, or maybe that person would be alive now.
Armed police will only kill as a last resort. But recently, the use of lethal force has been called on more and more as a new threat evolves. When facing a kamikaze killer, their only option is to step up and confront the threat.
We're now not looking at armed criminality, although we still deal with that. We're now looking at individuals who want to kill,
Put down the gun!
and are happy to die for that cause.
When you are dealing with an individual that has a belief system that is so extreme that they're willing to give their own life in the belief system that they're following, you just have to negate that risk by neutralizing them as a threat.
It's a routine day. This CCTV footage shows British soldier Lee Rigby walking from the barracks in Woolwich. What happens next would go on to shock people across the country. A car careers into him before two men armed with cleavers launch into a bloody, ferocious attack. But instead of fleeing, they remain at the scene, waiting for armed police to arrive.
Every time I authorise the use of firearms, one of my considerations is the safety of my staff.
Several armed police cars race to the scene, unsure what they'll find. Their orders are to face the attackers and only shoot if absolutely necessary. But as the first cops arrive, the killers race to confront them.
I saw a black male running at me, waving both hands in the air in a chopping motion. In his right hand was a cleaver or machete. I instinctively thought he is going to kill me. I can still see the look in the suspect's eyes. I saw the second suspect lying on the ground. He turned with a handgun pointing in my direction. I thought, oh God, he's going to shoot me. I feared for my life. I threw my taser away and pointed my Glock at him. As I was doing so, I heard shots and ducked.
Within seconds, the two men had been shot, and armed officers immediately begin to give first aid.
A firearms officer will often deal with a person who's dying and have to give and seek to give first aid. Now, that takes a huge amount of, first of all, professional skill, but real courage.
Police officers open fire knowing that people might die. There isn't a policy to deliberately kill people, because the overall intention isn't to go out and kill people, it's actually to arrest people and put them on trial and convict them and put them in prison.
Both men were rushed to hospital and survived their injuries. They were later found guilty of Lee Rigby's murder and jailed for life. Soldier Lee Rigby tragically died at the scene.
The new method now is to drive vehicles into crowds.
As a firearms officer, I would be going towards that threat.
You acknowledge fear, you embrace fear.
Anybody who says that they're not afraid, I think they're not being absolutely honest.
For 13 years, armed police in the UK have been developing their tactics, finding ways to corner armed fugitives and resolve manhunts as quickly as possible.
The way in which the police service reacts and responds to incidents now is very much based on the lessons learned of years gone by.
The quicker that you could get to a point where you actually challenged individuals, then the better that would be for the outcome. The tactics now are more upfront, more aggressive, and we will look to deal with and neutralise the threat posed by terrorists as quickly as possible.
And just a few months ago, London came under attack, and the police had just minutes to execute a manhunt in the streets of the capital.
The new method now is to drive vehicles into crowds.
As a firearms officer, I would be going towards that threat.
You know there are casualties.
Anybody who says that they're not afraid, I think they're not being absolutely honest.
It's 10 p.m. on a busy Friday night when three terrorists strike.
It's okay.
The gang uses a white van to injure dozens on London Bridge.
The new method now is to drive vehicles into crowds. They will attack innocent people who are soft targets, very easy targets, and it's difficult to defend against.
At 10:01, they begin a knife attack in the pubs and bars of Borough Market. Multiple 999 calls go into Metropolitan Police. and officers face a race against time to stop the attack. More than 100 armed officers make their way to the scene from all over London.
Stay out the road.
They're armed with handguns and high-velocity carbines, as well as less lethal tasers. Their instructions, based on years of experience, are to confront these men, to stop them in their tracks before they can do more harm.
You know something serious has happened, and you know there are casualties, and you know there are multiple offenders. You're scared.
If you're not scared of something, there's probably a problem. You acknowledge fear, you embrace fear. I don't think anyone necessarily thinks or gives time to the thought that what you're being presented with potentially could end your life.
What you're thinking about is, can I get more information? Where are the suspects now? What are the suspects' descriptions? Who's going where? You know, how many other vehicles are coming? Where are they coming from? Who's going to be the first? This kind of thing. As a firearms officer, I would be going towards that threat as everybody else is leaving. You don't know what you're going into. Are they armed? Do they have explosive devices strapped to their bodies? Anybody who says that they're not afraid, I think they're not being absolutely honest.
8 minutes after the first 999 call, armed officers locate the 3 terrorists, confront them, and take decisive action.
We will aim for the biggest part of the body, which invariably doesn't move that much, and that is the torso.
The reason for that is that's where most of the vital organs are, and trauma to the vital organs is a significant thing that the body finds difficult to overcome.
Eight innocent civilians had lost their lives by the time police opened fire on the attackers. The 3 gang members were killed instantly, a grim but definitive end to the manhunt.
No firearms officer really wants to pull a trigger. Why would you?
To take a life is probably it's the ultimate decision that you could make as a police officer, as a soldier.
It's not something that can be laughed about. It's not something that should be associated with bravado. It's a horrifying thing to have to confront. It's not easy, by any means.
We don't get up in the morning thinking I'm going to go and shoot somebody. We get up in the morning wanting to come home and bath the kids.
When you are in a position where it's either you, or it's the members of the public, or it's an innocent party, I just think your training takes over. It's a horrible place to be. Not many people would want to do it.
I can see the glint of the knife up here, and he's screaming, "She dies, she dies, she dies."
It's the most dangerous thing that you're confronted with as an armed police officer.
Shit, this has just got real. I thought he was dead.
He made it very clear to us that he wouldn't ever be taken alive.
You've done it now, you killed a bloke.